Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It is T-minus 1 hour until President Trump's first State of the Union address. The speech will be his best chance, or biggest anyway, to set the agenda in a critical midterm election year. Tonight, our roster of guests is long. It includes Brit Hume, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan, former DNC Chair Donna Brazile. She'll tell us about the left's 6 separate responses to the speech tonight. Well, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley will explain why President Clinton's position on illegal immigration is now considered racist 20 years later. Also on the program, a Republican congressman who says illegals in attendance tonight ought to be arrested on the spot. But first up, an overview. What can we expect tonight from this speech? Fox senior political analyst Brit Hume has seen a lot of them. He has perspective. He joins us tonight. Thanks for coming on, Brit. So,
you bet, Tucker.
The obvious one, every president goes into these trying to accomplish things, maybe one big thing. What do you think this president hopes to accomplish with this speech?
Well, I think he's hoping that he can get the Democratic opposition to warm up to him a bit after a confrontational and quite combative first year in office. He's looking ahead with his agenda in his hand to see what he can get done, and he sees that he can't do it with 50 votes in the Senate, and he might be able to command the House. So he needs to get the Democrats to come along with him. That's what the DACA proposal is about. And so the tone, I think, will be different from what we heard in his inaugural address, more like what we heard in that speech he made to Congress last year, which was not officially a State of the Union address, but for all intents and purposes it was. Same setting, same audience, and so on. Same TV audience, one presumes. So I think that's what he's going to be trying to do. It's going to be interesting to see him do it because, being warm and cuddly and friendly and accommodating is not what he's famous for.
No. So this will be very unlike the rallies he's been doing all year. Does he have any hope of winning any Democrats? Are they allowed to support him in any way now, do you think?
Well, let's look first of all at the immigration issue, which I think is front and center now because we got deadlines coming up and so forth. We had a government shutdown over it just recently. I think he's made what I think from the conservative side would be seen as a pretty generous offer, not only to legalize and provide a path to citizenship for the DACA group already here, but to all those who are eligible for that program who have not yet signed up for it. We're talking about well in excess of 1 million people. And for that, he wants a set of border and security measures, which Democrats do not like and are disinclined to give him. But if they want DACA enough, then he's got a real chance of getting enough to get it passed and call it a victory if he can tame a rebellion on his right, which is another issue he's going to have to deal with. So that's an example of the kind of thing he faces. Possible, but not easy.
Not easy. So what do you think he can say tonight to at least lower the temperature on the left? So I guess he doesn't want the rage of the Democratic side to build to such a point that it creates a wave in the midterm. So what's the fastest way to decelerate?
That's exactly right. That what I think he's understandably concerned about, and I would be too, were one of his advisors, is that the rage which you described translates into turnout.
Yes.
And the level of distaste for this president on the American left and to some extent on the American center is very high, and it would help him a lot if he could begin to diminish that. He's not going to win these Democrats over, so they're going to vote for him or vote for his party. But if he can reduce the level of their rage, he might be able to reduce the turnout in the midterm. And so, we'll probably see tonight a sunny and optimistic president. Yes, he'll boast about his achievements, and there are some certainly. And he will paint a rosy picture of the future and try to be sort of uplifting. And we'll see if he's able also to be generous in his gestures to the opposition. I think he's capable of it. It'll be interesting to see him do it.
Yeah, he can. I think he can meet that. But thanks a lot for that. That was interesting.
You bet.
Immigration, clearly the dominant issue in the country right now, and it will be going into tonight's speech. Recently, Democrats have stepped up the intensity of their rhetoric. The latest, they're denouncing the term chain migration as, you may have guessed it, racist.
Look what they're doing with family unification, making up a fake name, chain. They like the word chain. That sends tremors through people. I
I think a lot of President Trump's rhetoric is racist. When someone uses the phrase chained migration, it is intentional in trying to demonize families, literally trying to demonize families and make it a racist slur. It is not right.
At least 24 Democratic congressmen, at least one Republican, have brought illegal immigrants to Capitol Hill to watch the speech tonight, sending the defiant message that American law is irrelevant even in the chamber where it's made. Congressman Tim Ryan is a Democrat from Ohio. His guest is an empty seat, and he's keeping it empty in honor of a constituent who has been deported. The congressman joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So your seat is empty in honor of one of your constituents who was deported, and you're trying to put a name and a face to his story, which I understand, to the issue. But I wonder if you'll consider a couple other names and faces. These are your constituents also. The first is Jordan Johnson from Austintown. He died in November of an OD. He was 27. He was a member of the Laborers Union in Youngstown, Local 125. He went to Fitch High School. He leaves behind his parents, 3 brothers, a sister, and a grandmother. Randy Steeler of Youngstown died in April. He was 55. He played guitar, rode his Harley. He spent 30 years as a truck driver. He was a Steelers fan. Those are names and faces, and I wonder why you're not keeping a seat open to honor them.
Well, we've been trying to honor them with our work. If you're talking about the heroin epidemic that's been raging through places like Ohio and New Hampshire and West Virginia, we've been working real hard to get President Trump not just to declare it an emergency, but to put some real resources behind prevention and treatment. And what President Trump tried to do with his health care bill was throwing people off of health care so they would not have the opportunity to get the kind of treatment and recovery that they would need, Tucker. So you honor people through your actions, and yes. I want to honor Amr for sure. But there's Teamsters who aren't getting their pensions. Their pension's going to get cut in half. I want to honor them too. There's coal miners who have lost their pension. I want to honor them too.
Well,
there's a lot of people
and I think you should.
need us to work on their behalf.
I think you should, but you're not doing that tonight. Symbolically, and I agree with you, of course, honoring someone is much more than leaving a seat open. But that's what you're choosing to do tonight. You have one seat open, and you're leaving it open for someone who's deported, not for the people losing their pensions or your constituents who've died, the thousands of them in Ohio who died last year of drug ODs, but for someone who was deported for fraud. Why is that?
Hey, Tucker, you're talking about this issue. And so, therefore, this empty seat is already working because you're talking about a man who's been in this country for 40 years, American wife, 4 American daughters, paid taxes, was the first business person to move into downtown Youngstown when no one else would to start a business. And we've had a renaissance since then because of his investment. You think it's a good idea, with a case that has a lot of discrepancy to it, for this man not to have a fair hearing of the facts of the case, which is all we asked for? You think it's a good idea that he doesn't even get a fair hearing and he gets ripped from our community and his family?
I'm not saying that.
America's better than that,
hold on, wait, slow down. I'm not saying that. And I have no trouble believing he was a great guy. I think a lot of immigrants, including those here illegally, a lot of them are great people and they work hard. And if they're deported, it's sad. But it doesn't answer the question that what do you do with people who are here illegally? You're a lawmaker. If you don't like the law, you have a chance to change it. You're arguing instead to ignore it. Why?
No, I'm not arguing to ignore the law.
Yes, you are.
In this particular case, I was asking for this man to have a fair hearing of evidence in his case that nobody has heard, that would allow him to assimilate into the country.
Yes.
And this issue we're dealing with DACA and with the Dreamers was not an issue until President Trump made it an issue. And let me just say one thing, Tucker. This is not an either-or. I am for border security. I am for making sure we have enough border patrol to make sure drugs don't get in our country. I'm for throwing felons the hell out of the country. But when you are someone who's a law-abiding citizen, you're paying taxes, you're a net benefit to the United States, I think if you pay a fine, if you pay some back taxes, and you learn English if you don't already know it, we should figure out a way in the next 5 to 10 years to get you into the country and then expedite people who are waiting in line now.
You can pass that law. And by the way, I think what you're describing sounds like a sad situation. There are a lot of sad situations in Ohio right now. 4,000 people died of drug ODs. 400 were deported. by a factor of 10. Drug ODs are a bigger deal. And you're spending your time and the symbolic power you have to honor someone who's deported rather than one of your constituents who died of a drug OD. And I don't understand why. It's a simple question.
Hey, Tucker, I've spent more time on the opiate epidemic in my career than you have ever.
Not tonight.
And a lot of other people that are going to be criticizing me. So I'm not taking a backseat to you or anybody else on the opiate epidemic. You tell your president and your party to fund the damn bills we try to put forth to make sure that these people can get treatment and recovery.
Look, I may agree with but let me just say, I may agree with you on some of that. No, I may agree with you. But you've got a chance to send a symbolic message, and you're sending it. We know where your priorities are.
Treatment and recovery. We know where your priorities are, Tucker.
Yeah.
Do something about it. Use your...
I am. Congressman Paul Gosar is a Republican. He represents Arizona. He's called for the police to arrest illegal immigrants in attendance at tonight's speech. Capitol Police say they don't have the resources to do that, even though they know the names of the people who are there, as well as the congressmen they're accompanying, because they're in the newspaper. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Jeff Flake tweeted this in response to Gosar's proposal, quote, "This is why we can't have nice things," meaning that when Republicans get power, they break things. He's not the only Republican who is casting aspersions on Congressman Gosar, and of course Democrats are united in their contempt for his suggestion. The congressman joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on. So let me just ask you a factual question first. It's my understanding that a lot of the people who are here illegally, brought by members of Congress tonight, are in fact protected by the president's, in effect, temporary amnesty that he gave them under DACA. Are there any that you know are in the chamber tonight who are actually in current violation of federal law?
We don't know that, Tucker, because we don't know who's eligible and what's not, because what they did is they flouted it, saying I'm bringing an illegal to the State of the Union. So it just behooves us to actually know exactly who they are and actually if they were carrying identification.
So, I mean, I can't get in. I'm a member of the press for 25 years. I can't just kind of walk into the Capitol building without identification. Were they able to do that?
Well, here's the deal, is members of Congress, they were utilizing their office to bring those people in, and it wasn't getting the proper scrutiny. You know, we had an outpouring from across the country saying if I go anywhere, I need an ID. Yeah. In fact, yesterday, Congress actually said if you're going to start a bank account with your own money, you had to have a valid ID. So once again, when you're flouting the law about illegals, you better have that proper identification. Otherwise, you don't belong here. Here's the hallowed halls where we build laws. We ought to be upholding the laws predicated so that Americans see that no law we pass is above us or below us.
So just to be totally clear and factual about this, because your comments have driven a lot of response, including, again, from a member of your own delegation, Jeff Flake, also from Arizona. You believe that some of the illegals that members of Congress are bringing tonight have not been vetted in the same way that American citizens would have been vetted if they came to the Capitol. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You don't have the proper identification. If you were under a program, a visa or whatever, that's proper documentation. But the way members of Congress flouted it, and particularly in this president's face, that's what we suspected. And you know what? If that's what we suspect, you should apply to the same letter of the law that all the rest of everybody has to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, you'd think at least they would be held to the standards that Americans are, not to some different and sort of special standard. So quickly, why did your senator, Jeff Flake, attack you, if in fact he was attacking you when he sent out that tweet? What did that mean?
Oh, he absolutely is. We don't see eye to eye on this issue, Tucker. What I want to have is a conversation about all the issues about immigration, to make sure that we reward legal immigration, not reward illegal immigration. You know, I've got children, and what you do is you help children by saying, listen, this is the best way to do it, and when they do something wrong, they go into timeout. What about the victims that are standing in line for tens and tens of years and hundreds of thousands of dollars? They're the true victims. And then we also have to take on, you know, states like California that are taking a fight right to the federal government. In my state, you can't be against 1070 and for California. We got to pick this fight. Me and the senator don't see eye to eye, and I don't take his crap.
Well, and let me just say really quick in closing, I mean, he didn't actually respond to your point at all or make a case against you. He just dismissed you as if you were a child, which is, of course, the hallmark of a dumb person.
You know, Tucker, we've been crossed before. We had a conversation about his vote with Loretta Lynch and about his duties as a senator, and he lost that display in front of
Congressman, thank you.
In the audience.
We're out of time. Good luck tonight. Got a live view of the Capitol, the State of the Union, less than an hour from right now. The president's motorcade currently en route from the White House. Newt Gingrich joins us in just a minute to discuss what we can expect. We made a mistake, and we're the first to correct them always. That was not the president's motorcade, but indeed the first lady's you saw a moment ago making its way to the Capitol. The president will be en route shortly. The Capitol gradually filling up in anticipation of the State of the Union, the president's first. The address is just over half an hour away. What can we expect from the president? What's he going to say? How does he connect with his supporters and the large pool of people who don't approve but are open-minded? Maybe not a large pool, but there are some. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich joins us tonight, a very connected person. You are very connected. What do you think he's going to say, Mr. Speaker?
Well, I think this is going to be a speech about America, about our identity as a country. I suspect he's going to talk as President of the United States, not the leader of the Trump faction. I think he's going to say legitimately that the economic policy is working and that people are already seeing it in their pocketbook in ways that are real and vivid and tangible. And I think he's going to call for a bipartisan effort to fix immigration, both in terms of the dreamers, but also in terms of protecting Americans from people who have been here illegally and who've committed crimes. And I think he has several guests. I mean, if you go down the list of who the guests are, he has several guests who had direct relationship to being attacked by MS-13, the El Salvadorian gang, other kind of problems. So I think it'll be a speech designed to set the stage for a year of trying to work on things. I mean, I think Trump understands that the next phase of where he's at is to find a way to do infrastructure that has to be bipartisan, find a way to get to a bipartisan agreement on immigration, but to do it within a framework that's his values and his beliefs.
So you say he's going to talk about America as a whole country, not just a series of groups. It's not an identity politics vision.
No, if you go back and you look at his inaugural address, which I think is really underestimated and understudied, he talked there about the fact that even at the level of eliminating racism by saying, look, we all bleed the same color blood. We're all related. He said, you cannot be a patriotic American and be a racist. I mean, and I think he will talk about America. I actually thought there was a pretty good preview in Davos, which I think surprised the global elite, because he was unapologetic, but he also wasn't hostile. He said, look, I'm for America first, and I expect Merkel's for Germany first. I am for creating a tax code and a regulatory code that says America's open for business. I hope all of you are going to come and open a factory. And I think that it's that sense of describing who we are as a country. You know, the tax cut, for example, we now have, I think, the lowest level of black unemployment. I think we tied one other time in the last 30 years. Well, that's a real tangible result.
For sure.
You know.
His aides say he's not going to mention Russia. It's not in the text of the speech. Do you think he will not mention Russia for the course of the speech?
If I'm guessing, this is a guess, because I mean, presidents can change things in the car on the way up.
Even now, yeah.
My guess is that they reached the conclusion that to have a single word about Russia in that speech guarantees that the New York Times and Washington Post headlines are only about that paragraph, and that they then get to avoid covering things. And this is one of the greatest problems the administration has, that its messages have a half-life of a very short time because the elite media hates covering them. And I think actually the great challenge for the president is not tonight. My prediction is this will be a very successful speech. It will come across very well, and it will have a lot of things that most Americans, 60 or 70% of us, can identify with. The real challenge for him is going to be keeping momentum up tomorrow through Sunday and staying on these themes and not getting drug off by the news media, who want to, put out some chum in the water and see if they can get Trump to go talk about something that's not productive.
So really quick, you've seen a million of these speeches. You've been involved, I think, in the formation of some of them. How much of it is ad lib? Is every word the president speaks?
Very small amount is ad lib for a speech that's this important. Now, again, Bill Clinton one time was rewriting the speech in the car on the way up. So you can't, Trump certainly has the prerogative, and during the campaign, I was with him a couple of times when you would literally be rewriting something as the plane was coming into land to go to some kind of a campaign event.
It's amazing.
But every president occasionally, if you read the text and then you watch the speech, every president will ad-lib something. I mean, they'll get to a point, they'll sense the audience, and then they'll follow the rhythm of the audience to some limited extent. But I think these things are pretty well thought of. Most presidential teams understand this is the biggest audience of the year for them. It's their best chance to reach people who normally will not watch them. And therefore, I think they try to think it through pretty carefully.
Control it. Mr. Speaker, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Appreciate it. Our live coverage of the House floor and tonight's State of the Union continues right after this. A 4-page memo compiled by Devin Nunes. Congressman David Cicilline is a Democrat representing Rhode Island, the smallest state, but one of the best. He joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, thanks.
So at the core of this memo, which I have not read, there are probably a lot of stuff in the memo, but here's what we know is in there. Something that we know is true, which is that Obama officials approached a federal judge and asked for a FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page, who was an advisor to the Trump campaign, on the grounds that he was a foreign agent. He was a spy for Putin's government. Do you think Carter Page was a spy for Putin's government?
Well, I can tell you I've read both the Nunes memo and the Democratic memo, so I can't talk about the contents of it. But what we do know is it was a memo prepared by a partisan, by Devin Nunes, who in fact was so partisan in this investigation that he was removed from leading it. It's a summary, or purports to be a summary, of classified documents that he's never even read.
How many nonpartisans are in Congress?
No, my point is, I just don't want people to be confused. This is not an intelligence document. This is a document prepared by a partisan who has already demonstrated his inability to be objective. He recused himself. Wait, but let me finish. And he purports to summarize a set of documents he's never even read.
Which is why I didn't ask you a question either about Devin Nunes or about the documents. I'm asking you about publicly available information that is of concern to all Americans. The Obama administration made the case that Carter Page was a Russian agent, and on the basis of that case, spied on the Trump campaign. So I'm asking you, was that legitimate? Do you think Carter Page was a foreign agent?
Again, I cannot comment.
Why? Because I know that.
No, I can't. I haven't read any memo. But you haven't read the memo. I've read both memos.
I've read the New York Times.
I can't comment on.
No, but you don't need to have read the memo to know that.
No, but you cannot comment on things which potentially are in
on a New York Times story. You can't comment.
No, I can comment on a New York Times story.
And by the way, you just commented on the memo calling it partisan.
No. What I'm saying, I'm talking about what that memo does.
Okay, but how about this? Here's what we know. We know that the Obama administration argued that Carter Page was a Russian agent and used that information to spy on the Trump campaign. Is that okay, is my question. What do you think of that?
We have in place, and again, I cannot comment about this particular
No, how about what I just said?
No, what I'm saying is we have certainly in the public domain an ongoing investigation about Russian interference in our elections. There is a process to conduct that investigation which is underway. This is sadly another attempt to undermine that investigation, to create this memo and this whole release.
I'm sure there's a lot of politics, but hold on. As an American, I'm wondering about Carter Page.
I don't want anyone to interfere with American presidential elections.
Okay, but I'm not trying to. But my other concern as an American is that the government might be spying on people for political reasons. And we know that the Obama administration spied. This is, I mean, dispute this if you will. Am I wrong? Did Obama agencies surveil the Trump campaign?
I will tell you this. I take any allegation about government surveillance very seriously. I spent my career practicing criminal defense work and civil rights work.
It's a really simple question. Did the Obama administration authorize spying? Hold on. Just let me finish the question. Sure. And then I really want you to do your best just to answer this question. And I'll concede every other point. Did the Obama administration, as news reports suggest, authorize spying on someone involved in the Trump campaign?
I cannot answer that question based on my review of the memo.
Would you be concerned about it if you found that to be true?
I would be concerned at any time that a process was not followed, created by the FISA court and all the standards that apply to that.
But
I've seen no evidence to suggest that.
But no one's alleging that. No one's alleging that the federal judge who approved that warrant was out of line or the people who asked for it. I just want to know what you think of the allegation that Carter Page was a Russian spy, because it seems insane, because now he's on MSNBC, he graduated from the Naval Academy. It's not like this guy is disloyal that we know to his country.
No. Again, we have lots of examples where the federal government conducts investigations, both counterintelligence and criminal investigations. That's an important part of what they do.
But does it make you nervous of a political campaign? So like if,
no,
if
it doesn't make me nervous.
That the Trump campaign 3 years from now spies on the Kamala Harris campaign.
Because it doesn't make me nervous, because I have confidence confidence in the men and women, the professionals at the FBI who take their responsibilities seriously, who have a whole range of responsibilities to meet. There's oversight.
So don't ask questions about the government.
No, I'm not saying don't ask questions.
Heroes.
But what we're engaged. Sadly, what we're seeing now is just an ongoing effort to smear the FBI, to attack. Not by you. I'm saying the Republicans in Congress. And the problem is, it's an effort to undermine this investigation. I think to set the stage for the termination. For the firing of Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein.
These are real questions. I'm a civil libertarian. Democrats used to be. Now they're pure political hacks.
But why is that? Why is it, Tucker, then, when the Democrats sought release of the Democratic memorandum, which went point by point to answer those questions, every single Republican on that committee voted against it?
I don't know. I think it should all be released tomorrow. I mean, I'm on the releasing side, always. Good. Congressman, thank you.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Looking at live pictures of the White House there, the president is leaving shortly. President Trump's address less than 30 minutes from now, the first State of the Union of his presidency. Up next, we'll ask a former Democratic National Committee chair what the Democratic Party is going to do in response tonight in the chamber. How will they react? We'll get that next. Party and the left is united in dislike of Trump. I understand that. And this has happened on the right, too, with Obama or Clinton or whatever. But it doesn't answer the question of who's in charge, really. What does the Democratic Party stand for? If you could point to one person who embodies the values of the party right now, who'd it be?
Well, tonight you're going to hear from two of our rising stars, Joe Kennedy and Elizabeth Guzman. They represent the future of the Democratic Party, and they're going to talk about how to build an economy that works for everyone, not just the top 1%. The Democrats are coming out of the wilderness, but we're coming out with a message that will resonate with the American people who work paycheck to paycheck, who want to see more than a trickle-down tax cut.
So I hear that and I say the message, okay, so here's a party that nominated the wife of a former president, and now the response is one of the Kennedys. I think, well, I guess it's a hereditary position leading the Democratic Party, is it?
Well, you know what? The Kennedy family, like the Clinton family, like the Dole family, like the Bush family, these are families that have dedicated themselves to public service. I am very excited about hearing Joe Kennedy III.
But that seems more the past than the future, doesn't it? But I've heard he's a great guy for whatever it's worth.
Elizabeth Guzman, I mean, she is a rising star. We have so many rising stars, young people who are running for office. You know, we have a record number of women who are running this cycle as well. So keep the door open, Tucker. You can come
Anyone
in.
from the Mondale family?
Well, not that I know of.
Okay,
but,
just checking.
Oh,
so a couple years ago,
we got Jimmy Carter, we got Al Gore, we got a lot of people.
It's exactly the greatest hits.
It's great.
So at one of President Obama's State of the Union addresses, famously, a member from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, jumped up and said, "You lie." And was basically jumped on by people from both sides on the basis of the fact that was not civil behavior.
Correct.
Do you think you're going to see something like that tonight? Are you going to see open expressions of rudeness?
No. First of all, the party really believes in civility, and Leader Pelosi has already, the Democratic Party, Leader Pelosi has already said, look, the members are coming. They're coming with undocumented dreamers and others, immigrants. Immigrants are the foundation of our society, the foundation of our country. Many of the members are bringing their constituents to the State of the Union. The president will have a gallery full of people. This is a night for President Trump to pivot, to talk to all of the American people, not just his base. He has a unique opportunity to not just sell what he's accomplished, but to reach out to Democrats.
Do you think illegal aliens, people who are non-citizens here illegally, are they part of the, quote, American people?
You know, I know a lot of undocumented immigrants who are here, who are trying to find a path to citizenship. They're paying taxes. We want them to come out of the shadows. I do believe tonight the president can send them a message. He can send a message to people who are, you know, serving as firemen, they're policemen. These dreamers are in college, they're doctors.
What message should he send to people who aren't citizens, can't vote, and shouldn't be here in the first place?
Well, come on, Tucker. Some of them came with their parents.
Well, I think some of them are really nice people.
We should not penalize them.
I'm not saying we should, but do you think they're the same as citizens?
You know, it's time that we embrace what Ronald Reagan was able to accomplish in 1986 with the immigration bill. And if we do that, I think, come on, I'm trying to channel my inner me.
If we do that, the Democratic Party will rule until the sun goes dark.
Well, we got a supermoon coming tomorrow.
Donna, we're out of time, but I love your way with words. Thank you for coming on tonight.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. Hey, the door is open.
You make a bitter medicine palatable, and I appreciate it.
The door is open.
I know it is. Not coming. We're still waiting for the president to depart for the Capitol. Meanwhile, Fox News contributor Pete Hegseth, who more than capably hosts Fox and Friends Weekend, you see him every Saturday and Sunday, just published a piece warning that the president's speech tonight could lock him into a bad immigration deal if he's not careful. Very smart piece. We want to have Pete on to explain what he meant by that. Hey, Pete, what did you mean by that?
What I mean is the president has gotten it right every time he's remembered the forgotten man. And this opening bid from the White House, which gives, let's call it what it is, it's amnesty to 1.8 million illegal immigrants, whether justified or so, some portion of that, to focus on that, to let that be the fulcrum on which the deal lasts, I think could turn off a lot of Trump supporters who this president who said, we elected you to put us first, not illegal immigrants. So if you're going to cut a deal, make sure that you secure the border first, that you end chain migration first, that you end the visa lottery program first because, Tucker, we all know what the swamp does. The swamp will do everything they can to undo this. I trust President Trump and his approach on immigration reform. I don't trust the permanent Washington bureaucracy, Capitol Hill, and future presidents who will attempt to undo it if given the chance. So, to me, this opening bid, I think we should reserve judgment on the entire deal until its future manifestation. But right now,
I agree with that. But so, as you know the president, you're a Trump supporter. I think you understand his voters well.
Yep.
If the final deal gives citizenship to over 2 million illegal immigrants and allows chain migration to go on, for the next 10 years, say, increasing that number much higher than that, is that going to be adequate? Is that okay for Trump voters? What are they going to think of that?
I think that's a non-starter. I think a pathway to legalization is one thing. A pathway to citizenship and voting citizenship is another, let alone not just dreamers, but also the chain migration that comes with the next. If you don't, chain migration is the big one, Tucker. If you don't, you can have a wall all day long, and a wall is extremely important, and Trump supporters expect that. But if you don't curtail chain migration, then you don't ultimately solve this problem because you have no control over your immigration system. You don't know who's coming and going. There is no merit. You talk about a lot of your program, merit-based immigration, understanding who's coming into your country. He was elected to do just that. Standing on that firm ground is critical. Joe Kennedy's going to talk about promises made versus promises kept in the Democratic response. President Trump has made a lot of promises, and he's kept them so far. And when he's kept them, his voters have stayed with them. This is the big issue that's differentiated him from the Republican establishment. Tax cuts and health care, Republican orthodoxy. Immigration, it's where he's cut against the grain. Standing strong on that has always benefited him. We know the Democrats are going to resist him, Tucker. Even on a good deal, they've said he's a white supremacist. We can tease that out all day long. Let's work on a deal that understands the rule of law, patriotism, citizenship, sovereignty, and doesn't give away amnesty to folks who are here illegally. He just didn't run on that.
No, he didn't. Do you think the views of some of the Republican senators who've been involved in crafting this legislation, I'm thinking of Jeff Flake of Arizona, particularly Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, do you think their views mirror those of Trump's voters, of the Republican electorate, of the people who put this president?
He's a white supremacist. We can tease that out all day long. Let's work on a deal that understands the rule of law, patriotism, citizenship, sovereignty, and doesn't give away amnesty to folks who are here illegally. He just didn't run on that.
No, he didn't. Do you think the views of some of the Republican senators who've been involved in crafting this legislation, I'm thinking of Jeff Flake of Arizona, particularly Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, do you think their views mirror those of Trump's voters, of the Republican electorate, of the people who put this president in power in the first place?
No, I mean, I've known Lindsey Graham for...
Not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Well, I happened to be there that night, and I remember vividly many Democrats, many people, including Nancy Pelosi, who's still in Congress, cheering that speech. They would now say the rhetoric you just heard is white nationalism. What's changed and why? Martin O'Malley was Democratic governor in the state of Maryland. He joins us tonight. Governor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker. Good to be with you.
Now, you know Bill Clinton
It was
well.
nice to hear. It was nice. I know him. Well, whoever knows Bill Clinton well. It was nice to hear a president of the United States acknowledge that we're a nation of immigrants, though.
Yeah.
I
mean, it depends what you mean by that, but it's right. I mean, basically right. But he said maybe because we ought to, and these are the words, be disturbed by the number of illegal aliens, quote, coming into this country, taking American jobs and burdening our infrastructure and social safety net. What's untrue about that?
Well, you know, I didn't research where we were in 1986 on this, but I can tell you that right now the number of foreign-born people in the United States is about what it was in 1925 when my grandparents, both of my grandfathers, were fighting in the First World War, both of them sons of immigrant people. So, Tucker, I think that the trick tonight that I think Donald Trump is trying to pull off is he needs to shift. When he comes in here, no president since Richard Nixon has walked into a State of the Union with as much of a criminal cloud of investigation hanging over him as Donald Trump has. So he is going to shift the conversation to immigrants. He's going to try to vilify, criminalize all new American
let me just say, first of all, if your grandfathers were fighting the First World War in 1925, they were the only ones. Second, I would say that members, a dozen or so members of Congress have brought people here illegally with them to the speech. So it's not simply the president is using it as a distraction. This is the central issue of the Democratic Party. They just shut down the government over it. So it's not just, it's unfair to say wherever you are, it's not just a distraction.
It's an important issue for the Democrats.
Exactly. So let's just address the issue. Let's just hit it head on. What do you think of President Clinton's remarks? They seem reasonable to me, but do they seem reasonable to you is the question.
No, I don't believe that immigrants steal our jobs. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that in any study, reputable study you look at, you see that our country as economy actually depends on a certain level of immigration. And it's my hope that members of both parties will be able to put forward yet again another compromise, and hopefully the president will take it. But is it that simple?
I mean, look, I don't think anybody, I agree with you. There are upsides of immigration, but here's Paul Krugman. You know Paul Krugman, quote, immigration reduces the wages of domestic workers who compete with immigrants. The fiscal burden of low-wage immigrants is pretty clear. I mean, is there any downside economically to having a lot of low-wage labor in your country from other countries?
Look, that's not the problem we have. Last year, net immigration from Mexico was, I think, less than zero. So, look, the problem isn't that we have all these Mexicans coming into our country.
But I didn't say that. I'm asking you an economic question. Do you take it seriously? Is that something that you're concerned about at all? Is that an issue? It was an issue for Paul Krugman. It was an issue for Bill Clinton. It's an issue for a lot of voters. Do you think that's a real issue, or is it just nativism and bigotry?
No, not. I think right now it's nativism, and I don't believe that we have a level of immigration that hurts wages. I think what hurts wages is to force people to live in the shadows of our economy and not be able to live in the full light of citizenship, where they can actually, get paid a decent wage for a decent day's work. That's what's a drag on our wages.
Governor,
and that's the big problem our country faces. Stagnant
I appreciate your
wage
coming
growth.
on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
You're seeing the motorcade right there, right through the center of Washington. We're in the final countdown to the president's first State of the Union address. For a preview of the president's remarks, we're joined by two of the best connected and most seasoned political watchers in Washington. Fox chief political anchor and special report host Bret Baier, as well as Martha MacCallum, host of The Story with Martha MacCallum. It's great to see you both. So what can we expect? What are we going to see in just a minute?
Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be exciting. His first official State of the Union address. Obviously, we had a joint session of Congress speech last year. But as you take a look at the second lady, Mrs. Pence, getting to the box there, you will see this president, we saw him today, energized, trying to, as he says, unify a country that's pretty divided right now.
Absolutely. And we talked a little bit about immigration and just general issues in terms of what he's going to be talking about tonight. But the president this afternoon was very relaxed. I mean, when you look at, I'm looking at some of the faces as we watch everyone filling into the crowd there. You saw Trey Gowdy, who, of course, has been very involved in the investigation that's going on. And then you see the Kamala Harrises and the Cory Bookers, who are hoping that someday they're going to be in the position the president's in right now. But the president seems largely, at the moment, today, unrattled, very focused on this speech, and very much wanting to give America a unified future and to set the tone of an America that's safe and strong going forward.
So both of you mentioned the theme of unity, bringing the country together. You think the White House sees that as kind of the overall biggest task they face?
I think so. I think they're going to try to hit on elements that they believe they can get some Democrats to sign on to. Infrastructure, some deal on immigration, as you take a look at the motorcade making its way up Pennsylvania Avenue. And eventually, the First Lady will take her position with some guests that we're told will be a part of this speech tonight. I think when you think State of the Union addresses, Tucker, it's not usually the most decorated speech that we always point back to of a presidency, but this presidency is looking to this speech to get beyond the day-to-day story of the day, which has been the investigations, and Democrats who have really stood up to this president and not really said they were going to work with him. So
there's so much pageantry and tradition attached to this speech. Unpack some of it for us. Like what's the protocol? What happens first in the chamber?
Well, we're going to see the Sergeant at Arms as he calls the meeting to order, essentially. We've already seen Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, and the Vice President, Mike Pence, up on the podium. The President will come in. As we know, we will watch him shake hands. There's always some jockeying on the aisles. We've already seen everybody trying to get into the right position so that they might be able to shake the President's hand. It's also interesting to watch to people who don't want to be on the edge of the aisles as they walk in. We know that there's several members who are not going to be there tonight on the Democratic side. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus in particular who've decided that they don't want to be there. They say the president, they believe, doesn't respect them. So there's going to be some empty seats in the House tonight as well.
Right now you see the U.S. Supreme Court justices, Chief Justice Roberts there. Not all of the Supreme Court justices, again, will be seated here at this speech. And in the back you see Neil Gorsuch. And that is one of, obviously, this administration's, this president's biggest conservative wins, is getting Neil Gorsuch, now the fourth Supreme Court justice there on the end, to sit on this court.
So what is, if you were to kind of sum up the Democratic response, I know there are a bunch of different Democratic responses, but thematically...
Five.
Yeah, at least. So, but thematically it seems connected to immigration. Is that fair to say, their response?
Yeah, we're going to hear from Joe Kennedy III, definitely a shining, bright young star on the Democrat side. He's an interesting choice for tonight. He's 37 years old, graduate of Harvard and Stanford, and he is clearly somebody that they would like to shine for them tonight. As we all know, it's a difficult spot. We remember Marco Rubio and the drink of water, and Bobby Jindal, who gave a sort of lackluster performance. So the focus will be on him. Obviously, so much of the Democratic side has been resisting this president, so he's going to have to search for some positive messages, and what we've seen so far is that he's hitting some of the same tones in terms of unity, bringing the country together. You're going to hear some of that from Joe Kennedy as well.
And Maxine Waters is probably not going to strike the unity tone, Tucker, but of the five, it's interesting that you have five different Democratic responses in perhaps a different presidency. If the GOP was doing that, there'd be a lot of talk about how they weren't unified behind leadership in their party, but we'll see how it goes. This president has a lot on the line tonight.
So, both know the temperature in this city is really hot right now. People are emotional.
Except right here.
Yeah, except you're always pictures of cool. But I wonder, in the chamber, are Democratic leaders concerned about outbursts during the speech?
Nancy Pelosi, we're told, gave a speech that said, don't do it. Stay in line.
Interesting.
Don't have an outburst. But we may very well see that because, as you're right, tensions are high and emotions are high, especially along partisan lines.
Yeah, so obviously the immigration topic is the hottest one of all that you're going to hear tonight. But, looking through at least what we have so far of this speech, the president's going to try to bring people together on this. He's going to talk about the future, that everybody should have the opportunity to thrive in America. I think it looks so far that he's trying to give a speech that is not going to be very controversial. I talked to Bill Bennett earlier, and he was saying, but he has to also maintain the strength that we've seen in him that makes him different. And that's the line that he's going to have to try to walk tonight, Tucker.
These speeches tend to be foreign policy heavy, of course, it's the president, but particularly State of the Union addresses. Do you have any idea what he's going to cover there?
Well, I think obviously he has a great story to tell about ISIS and what happened with ISIS in Iraq, in Syria. He'll talk about our commitment in Afghanistan, perhaps about the problems with Pakistan. But I think, and I've talked to a few people, that North Korea is going to be a central focus of at least the foreign policy part of this. And throughout the night, there are going to be moments, I'm told, that people will remember, and that you may see a big foreign policy moment in this speech. His biggest focus, though, will be on the economy and what he sees as a turnaround directly to the tax law.
It's just one thing on the foreign policy front. You know, I think the thing that divides this president from previous presidents is that he is not, he believes that there's a connection between the money that is given from the United States and the relationship that he has with that country. And historically, those two things have been separate in terms of military connections and aid that goes to a country. He's made it very clear he doesn't see it that way at all, whether it comes to Europe or whether it comes to Israel or the Palestinians or Pakistan. So I think that's something that's very different about this president. I think we're going to hear some of that tonight.
So he expects something in return for the investment. Amazing.
Exactly.
I should have asked you this question at the outset because it's such an obvious one. Who's sitting, do we know who's sitting with the Trump family tonight?
There's a long list. As you see, the First Lady is being escorted to the box now, wearing a lovely white suit. She has a long list of guests. Let's listen in if we could, Tucker.
Obviously watching the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, just entered the chamber. There it is. A truly bipartisan moment. Cabinet. President Trump's cabinet. One cabinet member traditionally missing, always from every State of the Union address. That person literally in an undisclosed location. Practical and traditional reasons. The President's speech is about to begin, as you can see. And Fox News' Brett Baer and Mark McCallum will be back to continue our live coverage. Sean Hannity and Laura after that. Stay tuned. Fox is on this all night long.